All right, so I am joined by Mark Schofield, author at Inside the Pylon. I would say author extraordinary. Mark, you are the lead writer at Inside the Pylon, is it?
Yeah, I'm one of the leads. We've got a whole crew of guys now, and myself, Chuck Zada, Dave Archibald. We're kind of the veterans over there now. I guess you could say we're the lead writers. But yeah, it's been a fun little ride over there at Inside the Pylon. Thank you so much for having me on. I've been excited to come and talk quarterbacks with you.
Yeah, and I viewed you as the perfect guy to come on because you have actually played the position yourself. Sometimes we try to be armchair quarterbacks ourselves and we think that we know something about the position because, we put our eyes, to a screen, but you've been there in the huddle, throwing passes to people. The quarterback is the leader of all leaders on the field, and you've done that before, not just at a high school level, but you've done it at a college level. That's correct, right?
That's right. Yeah, I started playing football when I was 9. My first year I was a running back. Then I moved to quarterback when I was 10 and basically played quarterback all the way through my senior year of college, albeit 1 year in college. My sophomore year, they actually moved me to wide receiver. But other than that, it was 3 years of college football at the quarterback position. Now, it was just Division III, so don't think I was running around Saturday afternoons down in the SEC country or anything like that. But still, I've got, a lifetime of experience playing the position. And it does, bring a little bit of a different perspective into what I do at Inside the Pylon, quarterback evaluation and, looking at the passing game and offensive concepts because, I've kind of been in that moment. I've been in that huddle, like you said. And so I think it brings a little bit of a different perspective onto the work that I do.
So you're telling me that Wesleyan University gave you the Ryan Tannehill treatment and moved you out to wide receiver?
They did. It was interesting. My freshman year, I came in. I was fifth, I think, on the depth chart in preseason camp, but won the backup job. Saw a lot of time my freshman year, but we recruited three big-time guys to come in and play the quarterback position. And so since we suddenly had a depth of talent at the quarterback position, we were a little thin at wideout. They moved me outside. So I played there for one season my sophomore year, and then they recruited a bunch of guys. We had a guy that was a junior that was going to be a rising senior. He ended his career because of a concussion problem, and two of the other big-time guys that we brought in transferred because they saw the writing on the wall because of the other guy that won the backup job as a freshman, and so they had to move me back. So bounced around a little bit, but I really enjoyed that 1 year playing wide receiver because it gave me a completely different perspective on the passing game, one I hadn't seen before, being on the outside, on the other side of the throw.
And talk about that a little bit more. How exactly and you've obviously, I'm assuming, helped you, or this helped you as a quarterback. I mean, I guess understanding how receivers run routes, but, can you give me some very specific examples of how you think that helped you as a quarterback?
Well, I mean, one of the ways that it really helped me as a quarterback was when you're talking about offensive pass concepts where you have different sort of variations on a route design built in based upon the coverage. It's one thing to get over the football and see cover three as a quarterback. You can kind of see that. You see, the free safety in the middle of the field. You see, in the standard cover three where the cornerbacks are off maybe 7 to 8 yards. You can see that. And when it gets rolled, say from cover three to cover one or cover three to cover two, you've got a good perspective to see that. You can see the safeties move. When you get bounced to the outside now and suddenly you're lined up 8 yards from the sideline and you're supposed to run, let's say you're supposed to run a curl route against cover three, but if they've rolled that to a press coverage or cover two and you've got a defender suddenly in your face, now you've got to run a go route. You've got a different perspective on it. Or if you've got to adjust your route when it goes to cover two to cover three and you're trying to read the safeties. And so you just get a different look at it. And it gives you more of an appreciation for what the quarterback is doing. And as a quarterback turned wide receiver, then going back to quarterback, when I went back to quarterback my junior year, I had a lot more patience with those wide receivers on the outside, trying to make those reads and interpret the coverage because it is a little bit tougher. It is a different perspective on it. And sometimes when it's, say, cover three to cover four, the cornerbacks aren't moving that much, and you're trying to see the safeties. It's tough. It's tough to do. So I've got a ton of respect for receivers, particularly in offenses that do a lot of route adjustments that have to make those reads on the outside based on that 1 year of experience.
Awesome insight. And I'm assuming, too, that, if you've ever gotten laid out by going over the middle by a safety over the top, you playing wide receiver, it probably gave you more of a perspective as quarterback. Let me not hang out this wide receiver out to dry here. Let me throw this pass in stride, and if I can't hit this guy, maybe I'm not going to throw that pass because you don't want to get
Yeah,
your receiver in that predicament.
and it's interesting. My freshman year, when we were getting ready for Williams, which was one of our big homecoming games and one of our rivals, I was actually playing scout team wide receiver. That's kind of what started the transition process. They had two little shifty wide receiver types on that team, and they wanted me to play the role of one of these guys during that week of practice. And my job basically was to just run crossing routes because that's what they did. And our starting middle linebacker's job was to just hit me every time I went over the middle. And so I spent a week as a backup quarterback freshman getting hit basically like every other play by our starting middle linebacker. And then going into, an actual season playing the wide receiver position solely for an entire year, getting hit in practice, on the field during games, high throws and trying to like not alligator arm it. Yeah, when I moved back to quarterback for that junior and senior year, I definitely did everything I could to either put the ball exactly where it needed to be, blink in front of receivers, which is sort of the expression to kind of give it one last second before you throw it, make sure that nobody's in a position to light your guy up. Or if I did make a bad throw, I wasn't as hard as hard on the guy when he came back to the huddle as I used to be.
Two more questions about your playing experiences. So, what would you consider your strong suits? Was it the mental aspect of the game, or do you feel that it was some type of physical trait that you had?
That's an interesting question, and I think the way that I'll kind of answer it is it's almost something that you can see sort of in my evaluation of quarterbacks now. In that, when I was in high school, I was also a track guy. So pretty much when a play broke down on the football field, I could make something happen with my feet because I was usually one of the faster guys on the field. When I got to the college game, times when I would break out of the pocket and pick up 10, 15 yards, I was only getting back to the line of scrimmage. And now a jump from high school to D3 isn't a huge jump, but it was enough of a jump, and the talent around me was just as good that times when I was able to make big plays with my feet, I couldn't do it. The guys around me were just faster than I was used to playing against. And so I couldn't get those runs off that I used to be able to get away with, which is why now I've sort of got an appreciation for guys that can, quote, make plays on structure, make plays from the pocket, because I learned the hard way that there comes a time in the life cycle of every quarterback, whether it's, Peyton Manning near the end of his career or a guy making the leap from, college to the NFL, that you're not going to be as just that much better than the guys around you on the field. Like, look at RG3. I mean, he was a world-class hurdler, a guy that played with incredible speed and quickness. He could run away from guys at Baylor, and he could kind of do it at times in the NFL when he started to make that adjustment, but couldn't really do it on a consistent basis that he used to be able to do it with when he was down in Baylor. So he had to learn and try to retrain himself to play from the pocket. And so to circle back to your question, when I was in high school, I could make plays off structure. I could run around and do the things that we see Russell Wilson doing and the things that we love to see him doing on Sundays, running around, making plays, keeping plays alive. So that was sort of my strength. And it's why when I got to college, I was recruited to run the option. We were originally an option team, but we switched after I got on campus and we had some other guys come in to a more pro style team. But I was recruited to run the option. That's what they looked at me for.
Very interesting. And you brought up a very interesting point is like, okay, it's only D3. And, people would have that stigma, because I played some D3 myself. And, you say, well, listen, I didn't play D1 or anything, but I played D3. And people are like, oh, like they view it as like it's so inferior. But you have to think about it like this, like, even though it's D3, and yes, there aren't D1 athletes there. Like these guys, your teammates, I don't care if they're like a backup, they were one of the best players in their high school. They probably played in some type of all-star game at their high school. So the talent level is just night and day, at least from my perspective, between high school and college.
It certainly is. And I mean, I don't know the numbers offhand, but out of the thousands upon thousands of kids that play high school football their senior year in high school, there's only maybe 8%, 5% that go on to play college at a four-year school. And then there's like 1% out of that actually go on to get to the NFL or get drafted. I mean, so the numbers are, you're talking basically, even if it is D3, you're talking guys, like you said, that were, all-star type players, that were multiple year starters, that were, captains, and guys that were recruited by D1 schools that for whatever reason found themselves at a Division III school, whether it's because they just liked the school, what the school had to offer academically, or they were promised, a chance to actually play for 4 years rather than you might have a shot to maybe win a starting job your senior year. And they said, oh, well, I just I know I'm not going to the NFL, so I'll just play football for 4 more years until it's time to find something else to do.
Last question about this. How did you guys do when you were the quarterback at Wesleyan University? Were you guys a winning program? And I don't know too much about the school. I know that it's Belichick's alma mater, but how about that? But from my understanding, they've been good in recent years, like let's say the last 10 years or so, but I don't know if that was the case when you were there. I mean, could you tell me a little bit about how you guys did as a school when you were there?
Yeah, sure. My freshman year, we were 3-5 and 3-5 my freshman and sophomore years. My junior year, we finished 7-1, and we were the Little Three, which is Wesleyan, Amherst, Williams. We were actually co-champions of that little sub-conference within the New England Small College Athletic Conference, the NESCAC. The three of those schools have been playing football against each other since almost the 1900s. And they're in their own little sub-conference in that conference, and they always crown a champion each year. And we split the series 3 ways that year, and so we were 7-1, and we were co-champions of that. And then my senior year, we were 6-2. Now, more to your point, I can tell you that Wesleyan University is 1-0 in games in which I started the game at quarterback. I started one game. It was against Hamilton my junior year. I did not finish that game. I got pulled. And this is a rather embarrassing story, but I've told it, so I'll tell it again. I got pulled after throwing my second interception of the game. It was a 3rd and goal from the 2-yard line. I got blitzed from the backside, and rather than just eating it and settling for 3 points, I made a blind throw to our tight end on a crossing route in the back corner of the end zone. I got picked, and I got pulled, and they put the starter back in who had torn a ligament in his ankle in our season opener against Tufts. He did that in the first quarter, and I played the rest of the way, scored a touchdown, had a great game. But laid an egg against Hamilton. They bring the starter back in. We're down 14-6 at the time. And on one good ankle, he throws 2 touchdown passes, and we come back and win. So I can tell you, full faith and credit, that we are 1-0 in games I was the starter, but it really had nothing to do with me.
So you're saying that you got pulled because you pulled a Christian Hackenberg in that game?
You wound me with that, Kyle. I mean, that's a rough one, my friend. But I mean, I guess to be fair, yeah, I pretty much did pull a Hackenberg, although it didn't get returned for 98 yards or something like that. So,
well, I will say this: as much as you have been wounded by my comment, at least you don't have to be a fan of the team that drafted him.
I still don't get it sitting here today. I mean, when that pick was made, I was actually on air with Sigmund Blue and Matt Waldman, their live draft show, the Audible that they do over at Football Guys. And it was one of the first times in this newfound career talking about football, writing about football, that I was like legit speechless. And I had actually written that day that this was going to happen. People were saying that, Jets are probably going to pick Hackenberg at 51. And I was one of the guys that said, yeah, they're going to pick him at 51. And it won't make sense to me at all, but that's what they're going to do. And now, here we are on the cusp of the season started, and we're nowhere closer to him being ready to play professional football than we were when we last saw him sort of at the combine and the draft. I mean, he was a complete tear down and rebuild at the quarterback position, and now he's not even a viable 3rd-string quarterback in the NFL. They must have seen, he must have done something in the interviews or said something, or I don't know what, but they must have a very long-term plan for him to have made that sort of draft capital investment into taking him with the 51st pick overall.
Yeah, it's really a head-scratcher to me. I don't totally get it to this day. I mean, people have been praising his mental aptitude. There's this viral YouTube video. I'm not sure if you've gotten the chance to see it, by Brett Coleman. Last time I checked, it had over 70,000 views on YouTube, where he was talking about Hackenberg, and he spent a good majority of the video talking about the very first game of the 2015 season when he was playing against Temple, and he was making all these checks at the line of scrimmage, and he's saying, listen, might look bad on paper, he got sacked 9 or 10 times, but that's solely on the offensive line, and look at all the things that he's doing to ensure and help himself and help the play out. And basically he was praising his mental aptitude as a big reason why Hackenberg should be a first-round pick. I mean, he said there's no question that he should be a first-round pick, and he actually said that if he's there in the first round, Billy O'Brien's going to go scoop him up. And although that didn't happen, I thought in the second round when the Texans traded just one spot ahead of my New York Jets that Billy O'Brien was coming to save us, only to be disappointed. But anyway, what do you think of the mental aptitude? Do you think that this is a bit overstated? Personally, I do think that's the case. What do you think?
I mean, having broken down that Temple game, I mean, one play that sort of sticks in my memory from that Temple game was a pick six that Hackenberg threw. He had a weak side corner route. Weak side quick curl hitch route, sort of in a 3-by-1 set. And Temple shows cover three in the secondary. And you've got that sort of backside, weak side, quick curl. It's an easy 6 yards most of the time for the quarterback because that outside linebacker on the weak side usually isn't good at getting out to the flat in time. Or if you've got a safety that's dropped down there, they're usually not good at getting under that route before you can get it out of your hand. So it's usually the first place you're going to go when you've got a route concept dialed up with that weak side curl route against cover three. That's exactly what Hackenberg opens up to. He doesn't see that the defensive end drops off the line of scrimmage. He doesn't see it. And he throws it right to the defensive end who takes it back the other way for 6 points. And the reason why it stuck out to me was I had been doing a lot of Carson Wentz study around the same time of that game. And in Wentz's first game on the road against Iowa State as a junior, the year prior, he saw the same exact look from Iowa State. He saw the defensive end drop, pulled the ball back down, and went through the rest of his progressions, got to the other side of the field, and made a throw for an 8-yard gain. Now, it's two different players running the same kind of concept. It's not a complete apples to apples, but when you've got a guy like Christian Hackenberg, now starting his third year as a starter, missing a drop like that, whereas you've got Carson Wentz on the road in his first game as a starter, seeing that, it kind of calls into the question the sort of the mental aptitude of a guy. I know that Hackenberg had a ton of responsibility at the line of scrimmage, and I would agree with that point. But when you're missing things like that, you're going to miss even tougher coverages. You're going to miss even more disguised things in a secondary. And so the physical talent was always there with Hackenberg. I mean, especially when you go back to his freshman year tape, you could see that, oh, look, if this guy continues on this path, yeah, he's a first-round talent, no question. But when things started to crumble, the footwork crumbled, it all kind of crumbled around him. And for a quarterback, when the game gets sped up in your mind, when you've gotten, like you mentioned, in that game, he gets sacked something like 6 or 8 times. He gets hit a lot. When the game starts to speed up on you and you think that you don't have 3 seconds, you've got a second and a half to get the ball out, you're going to make decisions like that. You're going to make throws before you verify that defensive end is dropping under that hitch route. The ball's going to be out of your hand, and then you're going to see it. And that's how it all kind of spiraled out of control for him. So what he really needs is he does need, I think, at least a year or two to start to let the game slow down for him again. And if that happens for him, maybe down the road, you're talking about a guy that can come in and compete for the starting job. But from what we've seen to date, it still isn't happening for him.
Yeah, and to me, that's always been something that I just kind of cannot totally understand. Like, he needs the time. People are saying he needs a year, 2 years for the game to slow down to him. But from my understanding is this is his biggest strong suit coming out of college. Is, he's supposed to be a quarterback that's played in a pro style concept for 3 years in college. Pretty much no college quarterbacks can really speak of that nowadays. And he needs all this time to develop on the mental aspect of the game. I get it. Quarterbacks in general need that. But shouldn't he need that a little bit less than other people? But to me, the biggest question has always been, his accuracy. But you brought up some interesting points about, how he just crumbles when he has pressure around him. And we're starting to see some of those same concerns pop up during the preseason. And people like to talk about the first drive that he had against the Giants in Week 3, and I want to get your thoughts on that. But when we see preseason Week 4 against the Eagles, offensive line play is horrible in the preseason, and he's behind those backups, and he's getting pressured right in his face, and you start to see him make some really bad throws. He's not fully stepping into the throw. And he was really, really bad in that game. I think Benjamin Albright said that, the best way that I can describe Christian Hackenberg's performance tonight is blank awful. And then, your buddy Jeff Lloyd said you're being far too kind. Yeah. But, I mean, it's just anyway, so give me your thoughts on the first drive that he had in the Giants. Is there cause to be optimistic from that? And then, what we saw in those basically every drive since then, is that concerning?
I don't know if it's concerning because of the context around it. When you're playing in that fourth preseason game, yeah, you're a quarterback, you're the fourth-string quarterback, but you're still a second-round draft choice. You're going to be with this team for the next at least a year, probably longer. You're playing along guys, or you've got guys protecting you that probably aren't going to be in the league in the next week. So when you come back to what I was talking about earlier and how he needed time to let that game slow down for him, when he had that great drive, and it was a great drive, that drive against the Giants was great. It was good to see. There is a part of me that would have wished that the coaching staff had just said, that's it. Okay, he's done for the preseason. Like, I know we need, guys, Petty got hurt, and so, you need to have somebody taking the snaps in that fourth preseason game. You don't want Fitzpatrick out there doing it, but let him have that. Let him have that to build off of, because now what's in the back of his mind, it isn't that good drive against the Giants. It's everything that crumbled around him in that last preseason game when, as you said, he was getting pressure and making ill-advised throws as he's falling down, making ill-advised throws just to get the ball out under pressure, throws that should have gotten picked, poor decisions, quick reads. The game sped up for him again. And so from, a 35,000 feet view looking down on this, I wish they could have just let him have that third preseason game, let him have the good vibes from that. It wasn't like he needed, more reps to get ready to be the backup on week one. Let him have that, build from that. I think that would have been a better way to handle that. But, that's me sitting here, from 35,000 feet looking at it. I think, because of the context of that fourth preseason game, I wouldn't worry any more than I had been about Christian Hackenberg, if I were a Jets fan. That's not, that doesn't make me worry anymore. The concerns are still there, and they were there anyway.
Mark, I will say this about, if the Jets had just let him stop after that first drive, I don't know how much of a good thing that would have been, because Jets Twitter is just insane.
Oh,
when it
Jets
comes to
Twitter was losing its mind after that drive. I mean,
and just let's say he went out on that high note and we never saw him again for the rest of preseason. Once Fitzpatrick starts having three
the first
interception
incompletion. I mean, there would have been, let's get Hackenberg in the game, and I understand that, but I think from the vantage point of trying to get this rookie, who everybody, regardless of fan, analyst, I think pretty much everybody that's taken a look at this kid has said, look, he's going to need some time, and he needs to, get that confidence back in his own abilities and in the people around him. Give him that. Let him have that. I mean, maybe it wouldn't have been enough, but it would have been a nice little start. But they're handling a little different way. They have other things that they needed to do, that they needed to accomplish. They have to get an entire team ready to play on week one, not just Christian Hackenberg. So they had to do what they had to do. But, if you're looking at just what might have been the best thing for him, maybe that path would have made some sense.
I want to get your thoughts on this, and this is something that actually just came to my mind. Is, we do know that in preseason week 3 is the only time during the preseason that teams really kind of game plan a little bit. And we know that the Jets came into that game and said, listen, we have a plan to play Hackenberg. And it seemed like that entire first drive that he had was scripted. He was able to just, he knew what he was going to do, went back and executed and did a pretty good job. But then everything from there was not scripted. And my thoughts on that is, if he's so mentally, apt, he's such a smart, heady quarterback, as some people would say, well, why was it then he was able to execute when he didn't have to think all that much? But then when he didn't have that scripted game plan and he had to think more, that's when we saw him be not as good.
Yeah, well, I mean, that could be part of transitioning to a new offense that any rookie quarterback was going to have anyway. I mean, let's not forget, he's had a couple of different offensive coordinators when he was at Penn State. Now he's got a new system that he's trying to learn. And so if he goes into that game against the Giants, he's got the script down. He knows what those plays are going to be. I mean, you're running those through your head. Once you get that script, like when we were in college, I would get that script Friday afternoon. You're running it. Actually, we'd get it Thursday. You're running that through your head until game time. I mean, so you've got in your mind, like, okay, we'll run in, red right rocket X585 cross shoot. I know cover 3. I'm reading that weak side from the 5 to the flat. Cover 2, I'm checking the 8. I'm going to the 5. I'm coming down to the flat. If we see that cross dog stunt that they've showed us to, we've got to get out of that because we can't get that blocked in this protection scheme. Like, you've got that down cold. And so whatever the defense is going to show you, you're ready for. Now you get into a different situation where you don't have a sort of script laid out for you, and you're seeing different things. You're trying to learn a new offense, trying to run a new offense. You're seeing a different team that you haven't really game planned for per se. That's when the mental process gets a little flawed and a little skewed, and until you've got a number of years under you in that system, you might not make the right decisions right away.
Let's talk some scheme. You said in a piece that you wrote about Hackenberg, given the success that he played during his season with O'Brien, it is likely that Hackenberg's best fit is in a similar Erhardt-Perkins type of offense that looks to attack the intermediate and shorter areas of the field. This would also suit Hackenberg's play speed and decision-making levels. Now, you obviously watch a lot of tape, and Chan Gailey has been described as being a very multiple coordinator. He adapts. What the Jets have done over the last year with Gailey and what they're doing now, how do you think that this style fits Hackenberg's skill sets? How similar is it, or how different is it to an Erhardt-Perkins type of offense?
It's pretty similar. I mean, the three sort of pass-in schools, the West Coast, which is, we've seen start kind of under Bill Walsh, that really quick, short game with a lot of hitch routes, slant routes. You're really looking for yards after the catch. That's one school. The Perkins, which is more of an intermediate, a lot of crossing routes. You're attacking the middle of the field a lot. You don't push the ball vertically too much. That's the second school. And then sort of the Air Coryell, Bruce Arians type of vertical passing game, which is more downfield stuff. Those are kind of the three standardly thought of schools of the passing game. There's a lot of mesh and blend among those now. I mean, you look at somebody like Hugh Jackson, who last year in Cincinnati ran a lot of vertical stuff, especially with Andy Dalton. But then Dalton goes down. He's got A.J. McCarron, who doesn't have the power type arm, isn't really a great downfield guy, has more of an experience in sort of an Perkins system that he ran at Alabama, which is attacking the middle of the field. And so they ran a lot of West Coast stuff. So there's a lot of blend across it. So most coaches have some sort of multidisciplinary stuff to their games that they can adjust to. For Hackenberg and what the Jets like to do on offense, it's similar, I think. It's sort of a blend between West Coast / Aaron Perkins type of stuff, in that they're not always looking to push the ball down the field. I mean, look at what the Cardinals do under Bruce Arians. They're throwing the ball down the field a lot. Jets like to attack more that intermediate area of the field, throwing routes underneath a little bit, get the ball out kind of quickly. And how that's suited Hackenberg is that you get these routes where the ball has to be out quickly, and so your read structure is somewhat more limited. It's not like you're reading 5 or 6 different routes from across the entire length of the field, from low to high or high to low. However the progression is, it's you're deciding between a slant and a curl, or a corner and a hitch, and it's kind of simplified in that way. And so I think that's why he kind of fits in that system the best out of those three commonly conceived schools of thought. I think that was kind of the best fit for him, looking at the entirety of his tape.
Let's talk about some Brandon Doughty. And I don't know if it was on a podcast or if it was in an article that you wrote about him, but I think that you actually kind of liked him quite a bit. Is that inaccurate?
Yeah, I liked him, not in the sense that I thought, look, this is a guy that's going to go on to a multiple year career as a starter in the NFL. I think he's somebody that had a bit of bad luck. He had a knee injury early in his career at Western Kentucky, caused him to miss an entire season. So he's an older quarterback coming out. I mean, I think he was 24 around draft time. And so, if you look at that sort of Parcells rule, you don't want a quarterback that old starting out as a rookie. It typically doesn't go well. But I think Doughty is a guy that when he's functioning within an offense, he's experienced enough and adept at manipulating defenders with his eyes. I mean, there's a play that he had against, I'm drawing a blank on the team that they were playing, but broke down how he sort of held that free safety in the middle of the field while a wheel route developed to the outside. It's just sort of a savvy veteran type move, that ability to hold defenders, freeze defenders, even move them out of position with your eyes. Doesn't have an overly powerful arm. He's not going to throw the ball, all over the place, but it's enough. It's strong enough to function in an NFL offense. He's not going to, challenge the deep sidelines on that, 15-yard out pattern from the left hash mark to the right sideline. But I think he's a guy that can function in sort of that West Coast offense where the ball has to come out quickly, get nice, short, defined throws. Doesn't tax him too much in the vertical passing game. I think he's a guy that can a year or two down the road, be that backup spot starter type that every team needs. I mean, you think about when you're constructing an NFL team, an NFL roster from top to bottom, and you want to rank, your most valuable player by position. Probably for most teams, quarterback would be one, then maybe left tackle, on down the line. Backup quarterback is somewhere, I think, in the low 20s for most teams. It's probably above some even starting positions because you lose that guy. And if you don't have a viable number two, your team's dead in the water. I mean, look at Dallas last year. That was a team that had playoff designs, has an incredibly talented offensive line. They were nowhere without Tony Romo. And we're seeing it again now. We're going to see how well those Cowboys can function now with their number two guy in a rookie in Dak Prescott. So, to have a guy like a Brandon Doughty who can become that sort of steady backup spot starter type and give you at least, say, maybe 80% of the starting quarterback's production at the quarterback position when he comes in, that's a valuable commodity in today's NFL.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke about working through progressions, manipulating defenders, but you also said that, the kid, he's got some pretty nice touch on vertical passes. While he doesn't have an overly impressive or powerful arm where he's going to push the ball downfield, 50, 60 yards, maybe a 20, 30-yard pass downfield, he's at least got some nice touch. And you also said that he's pretty fearless when taking hits. Now, that might work to his detriment, being that he's got a history of injuries. But you like Doughty, and I think you had him as a 6th or 7th round, draft grade. But I think a lot of that was based on, the knee concern as well as his age.
Yeah.
If he didn't have the age or knee concerns, where do you think you might have had him in terms of round value?
I mean, if he were a completely healthy guy coming out, I'd say it was like 21. Probably somewhere in that late 3rd, early 4th, I think. Because again, he's a guy that can function in a number. If you strip away the age and the injury history and just look at the on the field production, he's a guy that can function in a couple of different offensive schemes. You can have him in a West Coast system. You can have him in sort of an intermediate Arnt Perkins type system where you're pushing the ball in the intermediate ranges along the sidelines a little bit. You're not driving the football down the field and throwing into tight windows where the ball needs to be delivered sort of on time, on a rope, into a tight throw-in window. But you do have some vertical routes built in, which he does throw with some nice touch and general accuracy, which is what you're looking for in a downfield throw. It doesn't have to be to the right shoulder or the left shoulder. It just has to be in a catchable spot for the guy. You don't want to be throwing the ball out of bounds when you've got a guy open on a 9 route. And so I think if you had stripped away all that stuff, all sort of the negatives in terms of the age and the injury history, you're looking at a guy that's probably late 3rd, early 4th, sort of how I evaluate quarterbacks and, look at them in sort of a 1 to 3 year sort of projection, what you're going to get back from that guy. And if you're going to get something good back, say in the 1 to 3 year range, then, assign an appropriate level of value to that in terms of draft capital.
Let's talk about Jacoby Brissett, who was drafted by your New England Patriots.
It's true.
I think he's your favorite out of this group.
Out of the AFC East rookies?
Correct.
Probably, yeah. I mean, and, Brissett's an interesting evaluation, sort of from that quarterback evaluation standpoint. He's a guy that I really went back and forth on sort of throughout my evaluation cycle with him, dating back to, over a year ago when I first really started digging into his tape last summer. And there are times where you could see it really click for him. He's a guy that's big, strong, athletic enough to make plays with his feet, but he's not a guy that you're going to run, the option game with because he's not going to run away from people. He's a guy that is smart enough to get what he can, get out of bounds, and live to see the next play, which I did like about him. That's something that you need in today's game when you don't want your quarterback taking unnecessary hits. Just nice segue off the Brandon Doughty discussion. But there were other times when it was almost like the game wasn't, he wasn't seeing the game as quickly as he needed to. I mean, this was something that I was interested to see down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl when I got a chance to see him in person, and that those concerns were still there. But so, okay, game's not seeing the game fast enough, but is there a system in which he can operate? And one of the things that really always stuck with me watching Brissett's tape, slant routes. Like, I actually did a series last year before the draft where I broke down every route in the route tree and who in the draft class I thought threw it best. And I had him pegged for that slant route. And I remember, it was a Thursday, the last day of practice down in Mobile, and it's the last session of the day. It's the afternoon session. Everybody's pretty much, all the evaluators, the media people, we've got our work done for the week. So we're just kind of taking it in. The sun had actually come out. It was an overcast morning, but it was nice and sunny. So you're just sitting there and taking in the South team practice. And they're running some red zone drills, and Brissett just absolutely throws a rope on a slant route for a touchdown. And, just whistles and cheers in the section from the guys who were sitting there trying to evaluate these guys. It was just an incredible throw. And he would consistently do that on that one route pattern. And then you see the New England Patriots take him. And you can kind of put the pieces together. I mean, the Patriots are a team that they love quick option routes, quick slant routes, getting that ball into Brady's hand and then out of it quickly to shifty receivers like Edelman, like Amendola, like now Chris Hogan, that can get some yards after the catch, sort of that West Coast element to their offense. And now you draft a guy in Jacoby Brissett who maybe has some flaws, and yeah, he's a rookie, so he's going to have to learn, but if he can throw the slant route and you're running an offense that is kind of built around one of that as one of your core staples, well, maybe it's a marriage that makes some sense. And so, I think it's a pick that I wouldn't have made. I was surprised. Not that I wouldn't have taken Brissett if I were the Patriots. I don't know if I would have taken him when they did. I kind of thought they would have waited and gone maybe the Kevin Hogan route, a guy that maybe could have fit in that sort of system as well. But seeing what he's been able to do so far in the preseason and sort of the talent and the skill set and the tool belt that he brings to that offense, I think it does make sense. Now he could be tested early. I mean, he's going to be the number 2 unless they make some sort of signing in the next couple of days where, they have somebody to back up or up a little bit. But he's otherwise the number 2 guy, and things can change in an instant in this league. So we might see him earlier than we expected.
Absolutely. You had spoken about how, he's not going to overwhelm people with his athletic ability. He can scramble a little bit. I mean, he ran a 4.93, but he can move a little bit, let's be honest. But in my eyes, I mean, I think I might slightly disagree with you here because I think he actually has an inflated opinion of what his own athletic ability is. And there are times where I think what was it? He was playing Florida State and, he drops back, and I don't know if it was a design run. I don't think it was. But he scrambles right up the middle, and he decides to leap in the air, and the Florida State defender just kind of catches him and, sidewalk slams him like a pro wrestling move down to the ground. I'm thinking, what are you doing, Jacoby? You're not that athletic. There are certain other times where he tries to be like Ben Roethlisberger in the pocket, and he holds onto the ball really long, and sometimes he holds it like a loaf of bread, too. He's not keeping it to him. So that, to me, was one big concern. And I haven't watched as many games as you have. I only watched about 3 of his college games. But to me, that's the one concern I have with him. I like his stature. I like his arm strength. I think he's decently accurate, but inflated opinion of his own athletic ability. And if he starts coughing up balls, that's a way to get into Belichick's doghouse. So What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I would agree, at least with respect to the taking care of the football. He hasn't thrown an interception yet, and I think that was one of the things that people were really interested to see, how he would do this preseason and turning the ball over. So he hasn't done that, so that's a good sign for his development now as a rookie. With respect to sort of the play style in the pocket, you mentioned Roethlisberger-esque, and in that Florida State game, I mean, everybody was tuning in to see Jameis Winston. This was 2 years ago. And I remember Sean McDonough compared him to Roethlisberger during that game because there was that play where he shrugged off 3 defenders before throwing a touchdown pass in the back of the end zone early in the game where NC State actually got out to a lead. McDonough made that comparison, but it's one that fits both in the good and the bad way. He's definitely a guy that has what we call play strength at the quarterback position. Now, you don't typically think that that's a trait that you're going to look for in the quarterback position, but he's got that ability the same way that Roethlisberger does to take a hit in the pocket and almost shrug it off. You're not going to get him down with just one guy unless it's an absolute blindside shot. And even in those circumstances, sometimes he's able to stay upright. Now, it's what he does after that sometimes it's very good. I broke down a couple of plays last year where he got a hit like that, kept his eyes downfield, didn't tuck it and go, and looked to make a play in the passing game. Sometimes quarterbacks, when the pocket breaks down or they get hit or they have to make a defender miss in the backfield, they go from thrower to runner very quickly, and they can't make that switch back to thrower. Well, you need to be able to make that switch back if you're going to make plays in the passing game. So there are times when Brissett does that extremely well. There are other times when, like you said, might take an unnecessary risk, either in exposing himself to injury or another hit, or in what he decides to do with the football. Maybe it's a late throw over the middle, or a throw that he's making while he's fighting to stay upright, while he's trying to get dragged to the turf by a defender. And so that's the kind of stuff that he really needs to strip away and remove from his game, because if he gives you the good stuff, staying upright, keeping those eyes downfield, scanning for a target in the passing game, and strips away the bad, that's a pretty good recipe for some success at the quarterback position in the NFL.
I feel like I'm crazy for saying this, but there's just something that when he drops back and his stature in the pocket, and maybe it's his body frame too, and maybe even a little bit about his release, that kind of reminds me of Jameis Winston. Am I crazy for saying that? I'm not talking about how they play the game, but just those aspects that I named.
I think the release point is a very good comparison. Winston had a really quick release. When I was, working through his tape when he was in Florida State, very quick, sort of over the top release. Got the ball from decision to throw out of his hands pretty quickly. I mean, we're not talking Marino style or anything like that, but ball got out of his hands pretty quick. And I think Brissett has a similar sort of ball carriage and how he holds the ball in the pocket to that release point. I think it's very similar. So that's a really good comparison. And now you mentioned, I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, Winston is someone that I obviously watched a lot of. I mean, the Jets had the 6th overall pick, and at times it looked like before the Jets rattled off the last 2 wins of the season, it looked like the Jets were vying for potentially the top 2 pick in the draft, and I was hoping that we could get Jameis Winston. So I watched a lot of him, but I digress.
He's something special. I mean, both of those guys, Mariota and Winston, I think we're going to be hearing their names for a long time in the NFL. That was a fun quarterback class to evaluate with those two guys, and trying to pick one over the other. And it's almost one of those things where you really couldn't. I mean, they were 1 and 1A for me, and I'm very much looking forward to watching those guys play for the next 5-10 years.
Who was 1A for you?
Mariota,
wow.
Yeah, and
I liked him too.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it was the question marks over the style of offense that he was running. At first blush, it looks like this isn't really the type of offense you expect an NFL quarterback to run. But when you dive down a little bit deeper into what they were doing at Oregon offensively, people were saying, oh, in that offense, he's not making anticipation throws. Well, he was. Just wasn't a lot, but he was. Oh, he wasn't having to work through progressions. Well, he was. Wasn't a ton, but he was. And, I even took it a step further, and a lot of their, RPO stuff, where you're making a run pass determination before the snap, and then you're going through the different options that you have. That's just a different sort of progression read. It's not, reading the 8 route to the 5 route to the back and the flat like we typically understand quarterbacks' progression read structure to be. It's just a different structure. It's, am I running or throwing? Am I handing it off, or am I keeping it all? Am I throwing the swing route or the pivot route? I mean, so it's just a different set of progressions. And so you add that stuff together, it's one of those things, well, don't tell me what a guy can't do. Tell me what he can. Can he make progression reads? Yeah, they're just different. Can he make anticipation throws? Yeah, he just doesn't have it, hasn't done a ton of it. Can he, work through progressions? Yeah, like I just said, he did. So it was there. It's just you had to kind of dig to look for it. And, seeing all that and the other stuff that came with it, he was just a notch above Winston for me. I mean, again, these were guys 1 and 1A.
Last but not least, let's talk about the national champion himself, Mr. Cardale Jones. You had spoken earlier about, vertical passing offenses such as Bruce Arians out in Arizona, and people were saying, oh, listen, match made in heaven, Cardale Jones out to Arizona. It didn't happen, but he is with the Buffalo Bills. And what I'm thinking is Greg Roman let Tyrod Taylor throw the ball deep a lot last year, and probably more so than any other thing, Tyrod Taylor showed you that he was good at throwing the deep ball. And I'm wondering, how similar is some of the concepts that Buffalo runs to, Bruce Arians, or maybe, what they're running out in Carolina with Cam Newton. There's very few offenses that are kind of those deep vertical passing attacks in the NFL nowadays. But is Buffalo kind of one of those passing attacks, and do you think that, it suits Cardale Jones' skill set well?
I think they do enough in the deep vertical passing game. I mean, think about Buffalo's season opener last year, and Tyrod hit on a big shot early in that game on a vertical route.
To Percy Harvin, yeah.
Yeah. So they do enough of it that I think it fits Cardale's skill set very, very well. One of the things that really sort of hurt Cardale, I think, and I didn't think this at the time, but looking back at how last season played out, when he had that magical sort of 3-game run to the national title, when JT Barrett went down and he had to take over, people were saying, "Oh, he should probably come out," and I was like, "No, he shouldn't. He should come back and compete for the job and get another year under his belt because 3 games isn't a ton of work and blah 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 and on down the line." Well, it really sort of kind of hurt him because Tom Herman left, and in Herman's offense for those 3 games, that was a pretty complex passing offense. It wasn't the Urban Meyer offense that he ran last year, which is probably more suited for a guy like JT Barrett than it is for Cardale Jones. And so his tape last year wasn't great, but his tape for those 3 games under Tom Herman and in big time spots, I mean, you're talking Big Ten championship game, national semifinal, national championship game. He did some really good things with the football in the downfield passing game. And so, looking back on it, should he have come out? I guess maybe, because you would have had those 3 games to work off of, and then running that sort of Urban Meyer spread stuff that wasn't really suited to him. Kind of saw him fall in the draft a bit. But I think Buffalo was a good fit. I was one of the ones, like you mentioned, that was jumping up and down and praying for the Bruce Arians, Cardale Jones marriage. That would have been, incredible. But landing in Buffalo is probably a pretty good sort of consolation prize because of the things that they do with, and they have done with Tyrod. I think they will fit sort of the bulk of his skill set and tool belt pretty well. And so I do think it's a good marriage. And, he'll get a chance to sit and learn. I mean, he's not going to be, I don't think in any situation he's going to be pressed into action early. He'll get a chance to sit behind Tyrod and sort of see how he runs that offense and, develop himself. And should he be called upon? I mean, look, Cardale Jones has come into situations before when he was the backup quarterback and done fairly well. So if he gets called on early, he might catch some of that magic like he did 2 years ago.
One of the biggest knocks on Cardale Jones is the fact that, some people say he can't read through progressions. He doesn't have much experience. He played in that Urban Meyer style offense for the majority of last season. But you didn't see him do that all that much. But then some people who have come out and defended him, such as John Ledyard, who actually, writes for ITP as well, he said, listen, Cardale is actually better at working through progressions than most would think that he is. What is your take on that? Can he do this? Is he successful with this, or is it a big concern?
I'm not just saying this because, John and I write together at ITP, but I would agree with John, and it gets you back to those games under Tom Herman when he was asked to go through progression reads. I mean, watch that tape against Wisconsin again. He makes a throw on an over-route concept deep down the field late in the progression read structure. He gets to like his 4th read before he makes his throw. And it's one of those wow moments where, Matt Miller has this expression where you turn off the tape and put the pen down. Like, you don't need to see anymore. Like, that, you could make an evaluation based on that one play. Now, I'm not saying that people should do that, but you see him go through and get to his 4th read, throw a deep over route late in the play, late in the progression, in a big spot like that in his first start. That speaks volumes. And so, yeah, last year, did he do a lot of working through progression reads and stuff like that? No. But there were other little things that he did, such as, I wrote a piece where, he takes a sack on a play against Penn State, but it wasn't on him and the pre-snap involvement that he had to shift the defense. He sees the blitz, brings a tight end in to block for it because he knows the blitz is coming, gets his offense in position to block out the blitz, and there's a breakdown anyway, and he still gets sacked. Yeah, in the box score, it's like, oh, he gets sacked. But he did everything you want to see a pro quarterback do, let alone a college QB. And so the mental component is there. I mean, he even said pre-draft that, look, he's a smart, heady guy. And I'd agree with that. I think he had a good understanding of not only that offense he was running under Herman, but even the offense that wasn't really tailored to his skill set in that Urban Meyer spread offense. And so, long story short, yeah, I think he can make the progression reads that he'll be asked to make in the NFL. He's done it when he was under Tom Herman in that different sort of offense and the spread that he was running last year. And I think he'll be able to, like I said, do it in the NFL.
Mark, I want you to rank these QBs 1 through 4. Go.
Ooh, that's a really tough one. I'll probably go I'll go Cardale 1, Jacoby 2, Doty 3, Hackenberg 4. And that's sitting here right now and what we've seen from these guys. And I think in putting it that way, it's, what are these guys able to do right now, year one? That's how I would have them. But as I mentioned, look, I like to do this in a 1 to 3 year sort of window. And, if you were to ask me how I project those four ranking out 3 years from now, probably Cardale 1, Hackenberg 2, Brissett 3, and Doughty 4. And that's because this all can circle back to that freshman year tape of Hackenberg's. And like I said, you saw the makings of a future NFL starting quarterback in that tape. Making anticipation throws, going through progression reads, accuracy to all levels. Like the stuff that Hackenberg was doing his freshman year, as a true freshman at Penn State was really impressive. Get that guy back, and I think that guy's going to be back by year 3. And when he's back, there's something there. It's just a matter of, and this is the unfortunate uncertainty of life in the NFL. Can the Jets keep a roster spot for him for 3 years?
Hey, listen, if they're keeping 4 roster spots for quarterbacks right now,
this is true.
They better be able to do it in, 2-3 years from now. So anyway, let's go. Let's talk a little bit about your book, 17 Drives. I read the book over the summer, and, I really, really enjoyed it. Wrote your review on Amazon. Just reading it, it made me, want to watch the plays because, you brought it to life. You brought the plays to life. I've never really had like a football book that could kind of, describe a play in that way and make you kind of like visualize what the play actually was. And, one of the coolest things about the books is you have so many different pictures in there, from, pre-snap to when the play is developing, and you're drawing, what pattern a receiver is running, what hole the running backs, shoot it up in. It's really, really detailed. And I don't even know, how did you draw those images yourself, like on a computer? Like, how did you even do that?
Yeah, I mean, those were created with a weird little combination of, I think the software was called First Down Playbook, which I used to sort of draw up the formations, and then just basically Paint.net, which is sort of a freeware version of Microsoft Paint, to like draw in the arrows and, diagram the plays out. So each play, like you said, it took, a pre-snap sort of formation where you get to see how the teams were lined up. Then I sort of show you the play art, what the offense was trying to run on the play, and then 1 or sometimes even 2 sort of play flow looks where I'll show you like how the play started or how the play, went from snap to finish. But that was kind of the process that I used for it. And, you can't just, football is a visual game. I mean, you got to see this stuff to kind of digest it. And so I couldn't just put words in front of the reader and said, oh yeah, well, this is what happens, without trying to at least describe it somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like, you just think, like, I'm talking about how that Michigan State drive came to life. Admittedly, I don't watch as much college football as I should, or probably would like to. I probably should watch more. And I didn't even know about this drive, but just reading through your book, it's like, wow, that sounds like a really amazing drive, and it made me want to go and watch it. And then I actually did, and then I'm starting to see some of those things that you were describing in the book, and you have more detail and perspective about it because you've read it. So definitely highly recommend the book. It's like, sometimes X's and O's talk to the casual fan could be a little bit boring. So I like to view your book as a way that you can learn about the X's and O's, but you can do it in an entertaining way because you're bringing that drama of how a play unfolds and how a drive unfolds.
Yeah, well, I mean, thanks for that. I appreciate that. That was kind of like the view of like the book on the whole, was to try to give the reader sort of a look at the entire college football season, from a week-to-week basis. And so, obviously you can't break down every single play run by every single team, but, you've got, Alabama games in there. You've got the Michigan State drive against Iowa in the Big Ten championship game, which was like, there was a big part of me that wanted to end it right there, because kind of the theme of the book at some level was, look, it is really hard to score a touchdown at any level playing the game of football. It is hard. It takes a lot of things to go your way to put a drive together and get the ball in the end zone. And watching that drive and breaking down that drive. I didn't see that game live. I was out that night. I had a work function with my wife's job. We were running around Baltimore, and my phone was just blowing up from all the other guys at Inside the Pylon who knew I was working on the book and that I was close and I was going to be writing about something from that week of games. They were like, "This is your ending. Like this is the ending to your book. Like you got to get to a TV." And I finally did and caught the final two plays, but Iowa did everything right on that drive. I mean, they were maybe a step late on a couple of different plays, but it wasn't like they were wildly out of position. It wasn't like they were blowing coverages. I mean, this was a 22 play drive, Kyle, that culminated like the final touchdown. Like it took like a second and third effort from LG Scott to just get the ball, that like the nose of the ball across the goal line. It took multiple fourth down conversions, including one where, Connor Cook with a bum shoulder and all just took the snap and just ran. I mean, it was a fourth down. They ran a speed option. And there was no way in the world that he was going to pitch the ball. He just put his head down and just picked up the yardage that they needed. I mean, that drive had sort of everything from a conceptual theme of it is hard to score a touchdown in at any level of football. And so, each drive, each chapter is kind of a story in and of itself of how a game played out. And then you take a step back and you look at all 17. I mean, that's a season of college football in your hands.
Yeah, it was awesome. And, that one chapter that you're talking about, like it was probably like 3 or 4 other chapters combined. It was that long. So that drive was amazing and great work on that.
It took like 3 days to put together, but I got to say, I really enjoyed putting that one together.
I'd imagine. So the book is called 17 Drives, College Football's 2015 Season, One Game at a Time, and you can buy it on Amazon. I bought the Kindle version. It's extremely reasonable. $5 for a book like that. You can't beat that. You owe it to yourself to go out and read it, even though the 2015 season is over. You will not be disappointed. And are we going to see some type of sequel, or are we going to see a similar type of book for the 2016 season?
Yeah, there will be. I've started actually working on it already. I started writing chapter 1 already. There will be a sort of sequel to 17 Drives that's going to focus on a season in the SEC. I'm covering at Inside the Pylon this year. I'm going to cover the SEC on a college level. That's going to be my focus. And so I'm going to take a look at how this season sort of played out scheme-wise, schematically from the Southeastern Conference, from, the week 1 games that we just saw until, the season ends. One of the things that one of the more interesting bits of feedback I got on 17 Drives was there's some people that wanted to see some more defense discussed in the book, because obviously I'm focusing on touchdown drives and 17 drives. So this way I'll be able to work in some defensive stuff as well. And so starting to put that together, we'll try to get that out probably, right after the national championship game or sometime around that time. So there will be a second edition. It was fun to write a book. So, hey, let's do it again.
Speaking of college football, Mark, I'm actually a Texas Longhorns fan, and they are up 28-14 right now against the Fighting Irish.
Oh, that's a nice little night for you shaping up, huh?
Yeah, let's hope that they can keep it up.
Yeah.
But anyway, before we go, we talked a lot about quarterbacks tonight. Now, your site, I think, Inside the Pylon, is great for learning about the quarterback position and quarterback play. You guys have awesome articles. You guys work in GIF images and videos. Your guys' glossary on your site is just absolutely awesome, and you guys are constantly updating it and adding more stuff. And, I'm on your newsletter now, and I'm getting emails about updates that you're adding, new articles, new glossary entries. Anyone who's trying to learn about the game, highly encourage you to go and read Inside the Pylon's football glossary. So if people want to learn particularly about the quarterback position, that's one place that I would recommend people go read the stuff at Inside the Pylon. But in terms of other resources to learn about the quarterback position, I think I heard you mention on another podcast before, it might have been what was it, Backyard Banter? I'm not positive about this, where you had talked about was it Ken Anderson, the former Cincinnati Bengals? He wrote a quarterback book. I think you recommended that one.
Yeah, it's literally just beyond the reach of my arm right now. I've got like a stack of football resource books I keep on my desk, and it's Ken Anderson's. I believe it's Quarterbacking or The Art of Quarterback, and he wrote that when he was still with the Bengals back in the early 80s. I mean, that's a book that when I was a kid, when I was first playing quarterback when I was 10, I got my hands on that book, and it's got stuff in there about, from footwork and drills and things like that, all the way up till that streak that he had. I mean, there was a time when he had that consecutive pass completion streak. There was a game against the Giants, I believe. I'm not too sure on that, but he had, I think, 20 completed passes in a row. That used to be the record. When he talks about the streak, he talks about every single play, which is fascinating. So that's a book that I would highly recommend. People that are looking for scheme type stuff, I've been recommending these a lot. The Nike Coach of the Year Clinic, which is something that Nike puts on usually, I think, January or February of each year, where they have college coaches from D1 down to D3 come and give talks. They actually put together a published work where they just print out the lectures that these coaches give, as well as any schematics or diagrams or play art that comes with them. And so you get guys like Derek Mason, the head coach now at Vanderbilt. You've got Jimbo Fisher. You've got Hugh Freeze. You've got Gary Patterson, Mike D'Antoni. Talking about offense, defense, special teams. That's great for sort of scheme stuff. I rely on that all the time. I'm either learning something myself or looking stuff up. Check those books out. They also have through that Nike Coach of the Year website, which is, I think, NikeFootball.net or NikeCoy.net. I'm drawing a blank on it right now, but they also have, coaching the passing game and coaching the quarterback. So if you're really interested in quarterback play, you can find those books as well. Yeah, it's cool. NikeCoyFootball.net. Those are the Nike Coach of the Year Clinic publications. You can check those out as well.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on, Mark. And you can follow Mark on Twitter at Mark Schofield. You will find the spelling of his name. It's pretty simple. Schofield. His name will obviously be in the description of this podcast episode. And I will say this, he is criminally underfollowed on Twitter. More people need to be following him. So go and give Mark a follow, please. You can also find his work over at Inside the Pylon. Anything else that I should be saying about your work, Mark? Am I missing anything?
No, you've been more than kind with the descriptions. I have to up my game even more now after the kind things you've said. But thank you for having me on, Kyle. This has been an absolute joy. I love talking about this stuff. So anytime, man.
Well, we definitely would love to have you back on. So thanks so much for coming on.
Well, thank you.